This is Just a Thought, a podcast for parents ready to change their mind and change their lives. This is Christina Stead, and this is episode number 44, To Feel or to Thought Work? Hello, hello, hello! The other night was a beautiful rainy night over here. We'd opened up all the windows in the house, we'd lit some candles, turned on some soft jazz music, and my daughter had made us both a hot cup of mint tea. And as I sat there sipping it and watching the wind blow through the trees and the rain pour down hard, I had the thought, this is a perfect evening. Nothing could make it better for me. And then suddenly, in all that contentment, my brain decided this much happiness was a problem. And I suddenly felt anxiety shoot down my throat and drop hard into my stomach as I thought, you're enjoying this rain, but somebody somewhere probably doesn't have shelter, and the rain's painful for them. And I felt terrible. I felt terrible for feeling so happy when other people in the world are still suffering around me. And so I questioned myself like I've learned to do. And I said, there will always be suffering, as far as I know on this earth. If that's the case, is there ever a time I'm allowed to be happy, even with all the suffering? And if I chose to be unhappy, does my misery make anyone suffer less? No, I don't think so. When I'm filled with happiness and joy, it's contagious. It's like when a cute, perfect, chubby little baby laughs. It takes a pretty cold heart to not laugh with them. Happiness spreads. So why is it my brain wants me to be miserable because someone else might be having negative emotion? Or even a negative experience? It's a funny thing to me. But try as I might, the anxiety was already in me, and so I decided I didn't need to do thought work. I just needed to process the anxiety. The thought work may help in the future and perhaps motivate me to do things to help others so that they lead more comfortable lives. But for the present, the anxiety was not a problem, just a neutral circumstance caused by my thoughts in my head. Interesting, huh? I've noticed that for many of us, once we start learning we can change our thoughts and in some cases direct our lives to the results we want, I find most of us start wanting to resist our negative emotion and not feel any pain. And we try to change our thoughts about everything. That is always an option. But negative emotion is not a problem, and it's through pain we gain wisdom. So sometimes we find ourselves in a circumstance we currently are not going to change, either because we don't know how to yet or because we're unwilling to change it. For example, I deal with anxiety. Despite the many things I do to improve my condition, anxiety is still part of my experience. Because I know that all my circumstances are temporary, I know a time might come when I don't feel anxiety anymore. It's possible. Often there are many hours in the day currently that I don't feel any anxiety, unlike the times where most of my day was filled with panic. But at this time in my life, there are hours I do have anxiety and many hours I don't. So anxiety is still a circumstance for me, and currently it's part of my experience because I don't know how to live without it yet. And then there are circumstances we're in because we choose not to change them. For example, I'm working at a job that currently I plan to continue working at for at least another 6 months. I have a lot of thoughts about this job that bring feelings of guilt and insecurity, fear, and judgment. But since I've decided I'm going to do this job anyway, I work on feeling these emotions. I sit with them and I think, okay, I feel guilt. I feel like I should be different than I am. I feel like I should do things differently. I don't feel good enough. Where do I feel the guilt? I feel it like a hot pressure in my stomach and a lump in my throat. It's funny, as I try to focus on these emotions, they become really slippery, kind of like soap. And they start to fade and dissolve a little as I hold them. They don't feel as big and powerful and scary as they did when I tried to resist them and talk myself out of them by saying I shouldn't feel guilty, I should feel competent, I should feel grateful, I am awesome. Those judgments and me trying to believe something differently than I currently believe right now just pile on more negative feelings. And I just kind of deny the reality of the fact that I feel guilty. So for anxiety goes in my circumstance line. I have anxiety. My current thought I really like when I feel intense anxiety is just to say, I'm okay. I'm safe. Let's do this. And I do my best to just focus on the anxiety. I feel it in my chest and in my stomach and my throat. It feels shaky and hot. It feels sharp. It feels like I'm on a roller coaster and I'm not sure if it's all going to be all right. I feel panic. So many times we try to process our feelings in our heads and we use a whole bunch of words instead of actually going inward and feeling whatever it is we're feeling. Our feelings are called feelings because they're a physical manifestation of our thoughts. We're meant to feel them. Whatever we feel motivates us to some sort of action or inaction, then we have the results. So if my circumstance was I see a bear running at me, my thought could likely be, I'm in danger. I need to try and get away. And my feeling would be fear and motivation. My action would likely be to run. My result would be I would try to get away from the danger. But with something like anxiety, I'm not actually in physical danger, and running from it isn't necessary. Same with guilt. Those emotions are safe for me to process. There's not an action I need to take to preserve my physical safety, and I don't need to change my thoughts for that moment. I can just feel what my body's experiencing. I've noticed that as I've become more intentional about what I choose to think and believe, I sometimes swing from wanting to blame my circumstance, my husband, my children, my job, my anxiety for how I'm feeling, and I start to blame myself. For example, if I'm feeling overwhelmed and I start thinking of how the circumstances in my life are overwhelming me, my husband doesn't understand me, my children are so great and I fail them so often, my job is too hard. But then I remember that it's not those things causing my overwhelm. Instead, it's my thoughts. It's my thoughts about them causing my feelings. It's easy to swing from there into, well, I shouldn't be thinking this way. I shouldn't feel overwhelmed. I don't want to feel overwhelmed. I guess I just need to change my thoughts. I know I shouldn't be thinking this way. I know it's just my thoughts. But on this road of thinking, I forget the fact that the goal in thought work is not to make me a robot that never has negative emotions. Negative emotions are a key part of this life. And the most pain and stress in this life is caused by resisting my negative emotions instead of just acknowledging them and feeling whatever it is I'm feeling. Feeling something is different than indulging in an action. Feeling is acknowledging what's currently happening. For example, when I'm feeling overwhelmed and I notice I'm feeling overwhelmed and I start judging myself for feeling overwhelmed, often I just want to eat something because I don't want to feel the discomfort of overwhelm or the guilt I feel for feeling overwhelmed. And the food numbs me, gives me a little dopamine hit, and I feel a little better for a moment, right? But then it just layers on other things. Feeling the discomfort's not bad. In fact, feeling discomfort is one of the most effective ways to motivate me to do the hard things that I actually really want to do. For example, if at the end of the day I'm feeling tired and overwhelmed, I can either go inward and ask myself, what's going on? What thoughts are we running on right now? Why don't I want to feel overwhelmed? What does it mean if I feel overwhelmed? What does overwhelmed even feel like? Or I can just go eat some cold cereal. And nothing's wrong with eating cold cereal. It's an option. In this circumstance, though, I'm just adding on another layer and ignoring me, ignoring what I'm really wanting for myself. And it makes it easier to swing back and blame my circumstances for my feelings, which I know isn't even the case. Starting right now, how do I want to show up? So, when you're feeling negative emotion and you're not in any physical danger, mentally take a step back. Choose to feel and acknowledge whatever it is you're feeling. I like to do this on fast Sundays when I'm fasting and feeling like I just can't go on because I'm so desperately hungry, even though I consciously know I'm just fine. I think it was Jody Moore who said that feeling our feelings is a lot like trying to grab onto a bar of soap, that analogy I used earlier. I think it was her. But when we're actually feeling our feelings, they're not that painful as they were when we were resisting them. They're slippery. And if we are able to get a hold of them, they seem to just get smaller and smaller the longer we hold on to them. Our emotions tell us what's going on for us. They're messengers that help us to know what our wants and needs are. How do you know what feeling you're feeling versus another feeling? How do you know when you're feeling happy versus sad? Scared versus angry? Uncomfortable versus comfortable? What's happening in your body? What do the vibrations feel like? Where is it in your body? I've asked that a couple times. It's okay if you can't find it. We usually don't look for it if this is a new concept. And often we get stuck in our head and we buffer and skip to action instead of feeling. If we've been avoiding things, if we've been avoiding negative emotion and been buffering instead, and by buffering I mean doing something to avoid and numb ourselves, whether that be eating or gaming or shopping or scrolling social media, anything can be a buffer if we're using it as a way to medicate our negative emotion. So if you've been buffering, the feelings in your body may be hard to identify, but it helps me to get to a moment where I can think a thought that triggers that emotion so I can feel it. So for me, I can trigger anxiety and panic by thinking, there are people suffering and there's nothing you can do about it except feel miserable. And I feel that in my throat and my stomach. So let's get back to your emotion. Where do you feel it? Does it have a color? Is it moving? Is it holding still? What meaning are you giving the emotion you're feeling? Is it true? So how can we know if we're resisting instead of allowing our feelings? When we feel negative emotion, we often try to get away from it, numb it, avoid it. But what's interesting is our negative emotion is as bad as it gets. This is Christina Stead. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a disciple of Jesus Christ. He loves me, He loves you, and He loves us. This is Christina Stead.